Hi guys, before we start today's podcast with Denise, I'd just like to make you aware that a lot of the stuff we discussed, some viewers might find traumatic, so we've put links in the description below. Hope you enjoy the podcast.
Welcome back, guys, to the Bear Podcast Show with me, Sean Scullion, aka the Handsome Stranger, Old Malin, aka the Bear, Aidan, the face for radio behind the scenes, and today we are joined with Denise Trolland. Welcome, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Denise, thank you very much for coming up. Look, don't be nervous. We'll not grill.
Till you said it.
We'll not grill you too much. But Denise, how about we always go at the very start of the show. We always go back to where you're from, where you grew up, and a wee bit about yourself.
So I grew up in a small village outside Ballymoney. So I'm a country girl at heart. We moved quite a bit. Moved from the country to Ballymoney, to Ballymena, to Antrim. Lived in Belfast briefly, back to Antrim, and then back to village life for me. So I've been over quite a bit.
You worked your way into the city and then back out of the
Yeah,
city.
my mum moved as she moved sort of forward the years through work and stuff. And then whenever we all grew up, she was like, as soon as you all have houses of your own, I'm going back home. And that's what she done. Left us and went back to Ballymoney.
She had the right idea.
Mm-hmm. So me and my brother have slowly, we've gone back sort of outside Antrim again, but back to village life.
You're
We're
chasing
sort of
her
following
again.
her. As you do.
And what was it? What was it? Your childhood? Do you grow up in Ballymoney? Or
I started off until I was about 7. I was in the countryside and then in Ballymoney town itself. But if you ask me where's home, I probably spent most of my life Ballymena. If you ask me where am I from, I'll tell you Ballymoney. I'm a bit of a travelling gypsy I've established, but I'll tell you Ballymoney.
the accent's mellow for Ballymona, hey?
That's because I've been everywhere. I don't even have an accent.
Well, you're saying about Ballymoney, so we actually chatted beforehand, so that must have been where your love for bikes come from, motorbikes.
Absolutely. Motorbikes in the head, it's a family thing. I think it's impossible to grow up where I grew up. My family are all from a wee small place that doesn't even have a shop. It's called Bushside, sometimes Clintyfinnan, and that's where Joey and Robert, Joey Dunlop lived across the road from my granny whenever she was young, so it's impossible not to be involved.
But you were saying no road bikes.
Road bikes,
No
love
road
road
bike.
bikes.
No,
I
but
haven't got one,
no,
not
none for
allowed
you.
one, not allowed one. My mum is absolutely forbidding it.
But you're into motocross.
Motocross, we do a wee bit of just whatever we can. I think if you
Do
offered
you-
me a
do you-
go on a bike,
Do you ride motocross?
no, well, I've had a go, but I'm not very good. We ended up with injury the last time, and I was over at the TD recently, and a boy said to me, do you want to go in the back of Ducati Panigale? And I was like, oh, aye. And my brother was like, absolutely not. I was ready for just jumping on the back. No.
Sean's in his
no
element
fear.
here. Look, he loves his bikes.
Love
hey?
bikes. Love
Love
motorbikes.
it.
I
Love
I had to get rid of all mine because I was going to get killed on one, to be honest.
It's the
So
adrenaline.
we spoke about it. So I had race bikes, and then I had to tone it all down. So I got a Harley, thinking it would slow me down a bit.
Do you think you'll ever go back?
No,
This is Sean's midlife crisis, the Harley.
do you think
He's
so?
like, this was his compromise. I'm a family man now,
So a Harley.
but I still like a motorbike. And then he rocks up with a Harley. And it deafen you.
Do you know what? Road racing's dangerous, but more people die on a fishing boat a year and climbing mountains than they do on a race bike. And that's statistically correct.
Right. I'm going to stop you right, because I've had this conversation before. Per person, per doing it, and fishing boat is one of the most dangerous environments in the world. So it's a very thing. I get these guys on the bikes because we've been up to the races and we were doing a bit of the media work up in there, and I see the psyche. It's more religion. When you get to speak to them, it's you take that away from them and that closed circuit, they're going to go and do that. They need that. That's the part of them, and they're well aware, which I couldn't understand. They're so aware of the risks, and it's nearly like that's what feeds in
Yeah.
to that level of risk is there, and they were like, they're more alive, and their families have come to terms. Their families are there, but I sometimes just when they justify the figures, it's a highly dangerous sport. There's no two ways about it. But I remember one of them, I think it was one of the writers, turned around and says, "Sure, look at the amount of people that get injured playing rugby here, but there's 25,000 times more people playing that." So it's the statistics. But Sean had to get rid of the bikes because you want to see the way Sean would ride these things. Mad.
Aye, no fear, no sense.
It sounds very, very morbid, and I think anybody in the race community, like it's a massive family, real big family. But I think everybody will agree, if you were to pass away on a motorbike, I think I'd be more content living life knowing I was either speeding, flying along in a car or a bike or whatever, than if I died of an illness. I would be absolutely content. And I always say that to my mum. If I'm ever involved in an accident, some sort of high-speed collision, some sort of doing something I enjoy, just be content knowing, it's well morbid, isn't it? But
That
knowing,
is weird as
and I think anybody that I know has ever got on a bike, raced a bike, even just been a part of that atmosphere, they're like, if I die on a bike, I'll have been doing what I love. And that is not a cliche thing to say, and we don't say that for the crack. Like, that is hand on heart, the gospel.
And mine was the opposite. Mine was like, I am getting rid of the bikes because I'm going to be killed on one.
I think I'd rather be killed on a bike than taken by an illness or taken by another person or having my life robbed from me doing something I didn't particularly want.
Strange way to look at it. In my head, I'm like, geez, that's mental.
It's so hard to compute the rationale of bike racers and things, but I get it. I look,
You don't
listen,
set out wanting to die, but
yeah.
if that was to happen, you'd rather go that way than any other way because it's the love of your life.
Well, Sean, you happy there? Sean loves to talk about his
bikes
bikes.
are covered.
And there's no point. He can't talk to me about bikes because the last bike I was on was a push bike and I nearly died. Climbing a hill. Literally tried to cycle a hill and
Oh, there's a good one. So we had a rally last week.
a really good one, Sean.
It was so we were doing Racky the day before.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've trained. That's all I want to say.
So
on
we
this
had
one.
these wee push bikes. So it was in around a manor. So literally the start line, and there was this massive hill. So I took off cycling up this hill. Looked behind me. Owen was nowhere to be seen. And I was like, "You're right." And he's like, "Nowhere to be seen."
Nowhere to be seen.
Nowhere to be
Now,
seen.
there's an ignorance in me. This was at the start, so I says, and he went up with like a fucking whippet. And I was like, I am not getting off this bike. So I paddled to the top, got to the top. Holy shit, my chest started tightening up. And
We were only 3 corners in.
he goes to me,
Right?
"Are you taking this in?" And I goes, "I can't take fucking air in."
It's
But
an e-bike you need.
well, hey, they were all on e-bikes.
They were all on
I have a
e-bikes.
friend sells them. It's a good chance you maybe seen him. Mm-hmm.
They were all on e-bikes, and I was like, "You're cheating." And then I started cycling. I was like, "How much are they?"
That's
But-
the way to go.
Anyway, we've covered our bikes, but we grew up in Balmoney, and then you moved about, and we're going to go through your story, Denise.
So when I was a child, P1, P2, it became very apparent I was classed as gifted and talented. I was always very bright, very intelligent, the youngest of 3, and my mum had 3 of us close together. There was my brother, sister, then me, and we were all 1 year apart, so primary 1, 2 and 3. And I do not know how that woman coped with us.
Primary 1, 2 and 3.
We were 1 year apart, literally, like so close together.
Jesus.
And I don't know how, because I'm sure not so much me, but my brother and sister gave that woman a run around. Everybody, if you ask anybody in my family that knew me as a child, they'll tell you, if you sat me in the corner with a book and pen for a day, I'd be happy. There'd be no bother out of me. It was just reading, writing, creating, drawing. I've always been quite creative, but good fun. Good fun growing up.
Busy house for your ma.
So when I was in P2, I had read every book in the school. The teacher had run out of books to sort of keep me, a wee bit of a Matilda, run out of books to sort of keep me occupied, and learning is my favourite thing to do. So if you ask people, about going to uni and stuff, I enjoyed it. See, learning new things or spare time. Like, I don't watch TV. I watch podcasts. I watch things. I don't even really watch a whole lot, but if I watch or listen to something, it's because I'm choosing to watch or listen to it. I've no idea what's going on in the world. I've no idea what's going on with the news unless I choose to sort of go and look. So I would rather stick on a TED Talk and learn about people. So fascinated by people. It's the whole psychology and philosophy and why people think the way they think and why they do what they do. That's what keeps me ticking.
And did you go on to uni?
I did. So I first studied primary teaching, but that's not the job I stayed in. When I was studying, everybody had said to me for years, you should do social work, you should, work in social work. And it's the common misconception that social work is just going in, removing children from homes, which it really isn't. And at the time I was like, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to sort of educate people and make a change and make a difference. And I didn't really think that that's what social work was. So I went down the primary teaching route. And in my last year, I started volunteering for a charity. I was actually in Belfast early morning on a Sunday morning and had never in my life been in Belfast at like 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. and had witnessed people sleeping in shop doorways for the first time. And I had, country girl, completely blind to this, did not know what the city was like. Been in the city, but never at that time, never seen people bedded down in a shop doorway, and it broke my heart. So I started volunteering for a charity in Belfast that works with homeless people, and they're very high tolerance, low threshold. So everybody and anybody they will provide care and support for. But as you can imagine, it can get quite dangerous. And the part that I was on was street outreach, which is probably the most dangerous. They had a drop-in centre and they had, you know, like hostel work, but the street outreach was you were out in the city centre to 2 or 3 in the morning. Absolutely loved it. Like a duck to water, went in and everybody was like, oh, this wee gentle girl. And I learned so much about myself that I was really, really good in crisis. Something kicked off, any crisis situation, and I was always the calmest person. Still am, calmest person in the room. Good at negotiating, just really good at building a rapport with people and calming stuff down. So then I amalgamated the two. Always wanted to work with kids. Knew that like kids were sort of my love. My love is for children, and I don't like children going through trauma, and I don't like the thought of that, and I like the idea of being able to fix and help and prevent any sort of further harm. So I just amalgamated the two, sort of the crisis with children, and I've ended up in a job that I'm in now, so I love them.
Enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
It must have been, you're saying that, when was that? When
2018, 2017, 2018.
Because I have been following a lot there recently, and you, like you, we're from a country town. Kirkstown's a country town.
Yep.
You don't see homeless in Kirkstown. It doesn't mean to say there's not, and people might say a thing, but I mean, it's one main street, so you will know, and maybe once or twice, but I mean, it's not a common occurrence.
No.
But Belfast at the minute, we were speaking to John Gardy, who busks in Belfast, and he says, in this new drug, they're like zombies.
Yeah.
And it's got so bad. But in 2018, like, I know it was bad then. I was just trying to get an idea of when. And how long do you still work with Charlie, or?
I don't. I went on to do my own job, and I'm not in Belfast at all anymore. But there was, back then there was heroin, and then there was another drug that went into the heroin, and that was 20 times stronger, and it was killing people. And I think we had 6 deaths of people known to use our service over that winter, like over that Christmas period alone. It was horrible.
They're dying literally in the street, aren't they?
Yeah, so we would have had a drug called naloxone, and you would inject them into the top of their thigh if somebody was in a heroin overdose, and that became like a normal part of my job, was injecting somebody with naloxone to take them out. It reverses the effects of what the chemical's doing in your brain, and it only works with opiates. It'll only work with heroin. So somebody was what you would call goofing out, you know, where they're completely unconscious to what's going on around them, and you know that their breathing's going and they're overdosing, like they're dying, they're slowly dying. And we would inject them with naloxone, and it is an absolute miracle drug. Like, they bounce up with this feeling of, it's like adrenaline just goes through them and they're back to life. And I don't think I ever gave myself as much credit for how many lives were saved. You know, now I sit back and I think, at the time, you don't realise you're saving lives. There's people maybe trying to jump off the West Link Bridge, and you're like rugby tackling them to the ground, and it's just constant, you know, people with mental health issues, drug addictions. And I look back and I think, like, how many lives were saved, and that keeps me going the rest of my life. Like, I know there's nothing that I could ever do that was bad that could undo all the good that was done.
I think whenever you're in it and you're treating it as a job, you don't think about what you're actually doing.
You're so proactive,
because you're just there.
yeah.
You're like, this is my job to do. That's what it is. But it's like you say, it's only afterwards, whenever you actually sit down, you're like, how many lives did I save?
Yeah.
And you don't think about it whenever you're in it.
You don't realise, it's just, it becomes almost habit, almost habitual that you're going through this, and you don't realise just.
But you're saying that so routinely, as in, I'm injecting someone. Like, I have never, thank God, because that's not something I want to see. But, like, you know, heroin and all, and I know it's more common to think, but, like, I've never seen it, or I've seen people, obviously, in the street, and that's stupid, and I've been in San Fran and seen their homeless crisis. But somebody actually at that tipping age where they're about to die, like, what age were you? You're in uni, 21, 22?
I was older because I was older whenever I went to uni that time. So I was about 6 years ago, about 5-6 years ago. So
Well,
25.
well, then, like, if you come to the country and then all of a sudden somebody's dying in front of you, like, that's fucking mental.
To go from working in a nursery, working with children and working with all these primary school age children, to then go into that, a wee bit surreal, a wee bit.
But like the first time somebody's taking an overdose and you have to, like, do you not be like, but also, this is weird, do you not be sometimes like angry? You're like, I'm just kicking the ball down. This isn't curing. This is like that saved them there. But
Can be frustrating because you save somebody's life and you see them 3 days later and they're at it again. But the issue I had in Northern Ireland, people talk about there being rehabs and there's not a proper rehab facility. There's detox clinics, but there's not. A lot of people go over to England and they'll go to rehab there and it's like 12-week programs and stuff. They come here, they're in here, and it's like you can be sent, there's a detox clinic in, say, Hollywell, or there's Carlisle House in Belfast, but it's not actually helping the problem. It's a temporary solution, and I think this is where the problem comes to. It's like, get them off it now and wean them off, and that's fine, but a lot of it's psychology based. A lot of it goes back to childhood, and if you look at adverse childhood experiences, it makes up everything that we do now. If you had faced any sort of adversity in childhood, that's why we respond to crisis or even excitement. Any feeling we have all goes back to childhood, and people don't realise that. And I think that there's not enough therapy work done to cure addiction, because that person's feeling a certain type of way and your feelings connect to your behaviours, and they're doing that either to escape something or they're chasing a high, and what are they running from, or why are they chasing a high?
they're masking what the real issue is. So addressing the drug use, it's only covering for what's the underlying issue. There's a common thing in the government don't address and set this up for, and I know this is going to sound awful, they'll die off.
Yeah.
That problem will die away because it won't continue to stay. It grows, and they think this, and it's like, you want to see. I know in Belfast how bad it is, and it's getting to serious levels. We don't even have a functioning government. So, but in America, it's becoming a proper epidemic, and especially in San Francisco, the city is just collapsing with the problem of drug abuse and homelessness, and it's becoming like that here now. But there was, I can't remember who done the talk on it, and there's like, the government don't address these things for the simple reason is they're dying off. They die with the problem. Yeah. So they don't need to address it, which sounds so callous, like that is, but you're bound to have seen some awful, like you put yourself,
horrific.
Like a young girl in the middle of that, that's it's dangerous on its own.
I had situations where there's a lot, it's just crisis, and people running about at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning is going to be dangerous anyway. Belfast city centre. Now, some people choose to bed down in a shop doorway because the police do constant drive-bys, they're under CCTV. It's extremely busy at that. Like, it's surprising how busy a place can be in the dead of the night. So some people feel safe, but then you have the people that stay out and they wouldn't take a hostel bed if you offered it to them, and it's social. And it's really difficult to get people to understand that some people are homeless by choice. And people say to me, what do you mean by choice? And I'm like, they're choosing to stay out in the streets because it's a way of life for them, or it's socially, or they're tapping, they're getting money or whatever. But some people choose to stay out. But we would have had people running about, and at that time of night, there's drugs on board, there's violence, a lot of stuff going on. And I remember one night there was a fight, and it was 2 service users. And we're there sort of, you don't try to get involved too much, but you're there and you're trying to sort of negotiate. You can't like physically intervene because we weren't trained for that in that job. You were never expected to. But I had a boy threatening, he pulled out a needle and he threatened to, he was like, I'll pin you. He's like, I've hepatitis C and I'll pin you. And he absolutely meant it because we had his records, and I knew that he had hepatitis, he was positive, and he was threatening then to jab me with a used needle. And I was like, at what point, like, I'm here sort of trying to help you. And a lot of that's quite disheartening. Yeah. It can be disheartening because you are there to help them, and trying to explain to somebody, I am only trying to help you. Or when you hit them with a naloxone, in the leg. Sometimes it takes 1, sometimes 2, and you do this and they get the burst of adrenaline. I'd say more often than not, they bounce up and they want to hit you. You've taken them out of their buzz, you've taken them out of that feeling, and they don't like the feeling of adrenaline because that to them is panic, and that's unsafe, and that's not what they want. And they bounce up even though you've just saved their life, and the first thing they want to do is spark you out. That's difficult. That's something that you just sort of have to accept.
Fuck. Being threatened.
Mm-hmm.
Hepatitis C.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so much you can expect of somebody, but like Jesus, the self-destructive nature of that is like, even for to say that, you know, when you're trying to help, like that's at that point I you know, you're better than me because I would have been.
I think it takes a certain type of people to do that type of job, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like me, I'd be like, fuck them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm here to help you.
Yeah.
If you don't want my help, well then screw you.
You're not the police. You're not going to stick them in a cell, or you're not going to do anything to them. You're not the paramilitaries. You're not going to take them for a beating. Like, you're there genuinely to help them find somewhere to stay and stop the conflict and stop whatever's going on. And
do you ever get, there has to be compassion fatigue there, that you're trying and somebody you'd hoped for just goes further down the rabbit hole, or they die, or and you're just like, fuck am I doing here?
we have something, what we call in my line of work, is vicarious trauma. And that's where somebody else experiences something, but you go through the emotions with them. And when you're in any sort of caregiving job or any situation with somebody and they're going through something, you're going through it with them. And sometimes you get burnout, and it's really hard. It's really difficult not to take your job home with you. You do experience it. People say you walk out the door and you shut off. And sometimes you do, and sometimes the good outweighs the bad, and you think of how all the benefits of doing what you're doing and how many lives you saved and how many bad things you've prevented. But sometimes it does catch up with you, and you are losing sleep, and you are thinking, could I have done better? And see that second guessing yourself, that's something that is really, really difficult. If somebody dies or something happens, you think, what if I was on shift that night? Could I talk to them? Could I have prevented them from taking their own life? Could I have prevented them, But you can't live like that either. You can't sort of think. Hindsight is a terrible thing. And I tell everybody, try not to look back and think what could have done different, because you will never, ever, ever change what has happened. You can only change the outcome. You can only change the future, never the past.
As a caregiver, you get extra days. It's important to have self-care. Like you're saying that. It's important to make sure 100% that you're okay, because
I'm massive about that now. I wasn't always, but now I've learned it all starts with self.
And then you've moved away from Belfast. So you were working with the charity. How long did you work with that charity?
A couple of years. Just enough.
It would. That's what I was saying about the compassion fatigue. It would anger you, because like there's nothing, like who's helping there. There's nothing. But you moved away, and then you went on to change your profession. Did you move back? Did you move back out of Belfast?
I didn't live in Belfast at the time.
Right.
I still lived in Antrim and travelled to Belfast. I do quite a lot of travelling about the country just for work and stuff, so driving's never been an issue. But I was back in Antrim, and then that's where I met somebody. I had just left that job and I met somebody, and previous to that, while I was working there, I was with my ex who I'd been with. Like, we'd known each other since we were kids. Now we're very, very good friends now. But we had quite a turbulent ending to our relationship, and it wasn't great. We just outgrew each other, and I was going through uni and working 2 jobs, and he was working a job. But I always joke that I outgrew him. He was still into the partying and stuff, and I wanted the boring, settled life. Just let's make things better. Let's get a better house and a better car, and always moving on. So our relationship end was not great. It was really bad, quite turbulent, and my self-esteem was probably on the floor. So I met a boy at that time, and he done the whole, oh, you're the most clever girl I've ever met, you are the kindest girl I've ever met, and very, very, very early on love bombed me. And I only know that now, but at the time I was like, he absolutely adores me, and I've gone from somebody who didn't appreciate and didn't know anything about me, and I now know that he studied me to figure out what I wanted in life, and he apparently wanted all the same things. And anything I said about my life, he was mirroring everything I said, and he was mirroring my personality traits. And I was like, he is the kindest boy in the world, and he was always like very for children, like something I'm so passionate about is children not suffering abuse, trauma, harm, anything. And he was always the same. And if he saw somebody telling the child off in the street, I remember there was a boy and he's been really rough with their child, and we're out shopping in Belfast, and he like confronted him in public because he was like, don't you dare speak to, I don't care if it's your son or not, like don't be speaking to your child like that. And I remember always thinking, like, you're such a lovely person, your heart is really in the right place. Time went on and the cracks were showing, and I had to constantly show him my phone. And I remember like 2 months in, and I was on a family holiday, and my ex was there because it had been booked like 2 years previous. And I remember I only knew this boy for 2 months, and he couldn't get in touch with me. One day I was lying by the pool, as you do, relaxing on holiday, and it was a family holiday. My family was there, my ex's family were there, and all the kids. It was like there was a whole pile of us. And he messaged every one of my family, everybody he knew on Facebook, because he couldn't get in touch with me, and being really violently abusive and calling names and like absolutely horrendous things he was saying, even to my sister and mum. And they were like, will you stay away from that boy? Like, he's obsessed with you. And I'll never forget my mum saying that to me early on. And I was like, he's not. Like, he had me on this pedestal, and I thought he was doing it out of love. And I was like, oh, he can't manage things. And then as time got on, he started saying he had a really rough childhood. And it turns out, I think he did. But I always made excuses for his behaviour. But there were times, I remember going over one day and I said, listen, I'll not be back. Like, your behaviour is, I've never seen anything like this in my life before. This is not normal at all. You're so fixated on me. And I was over, and he grabbed my phone out the driver's side of the door, out the window, and he stole my phone. And that we later established that was a bargain, until it was a brand new contract phone, probably worth £1,000. So what did I do? Went back to see him. Do you know, there was always something stolen, so it became the point where there was a bank card taken. And eventually I got to be an expert in my own safety. He was always taking car keys, never physically violent, really emotionally manipulative. He was taking car keys or taking bank cards, and I would have went to meet him with no phone, left the phone in the car, parked somewhere maybe like half a mile away, and said, I'll meet you at such and such. He'd expected me to pull up in the car, and I'd have walked around the corner because my car was a mile away, with a car key down the sock and no phone and no bank card, because I thought, I'm not giving you anything to steal off me. In hindsight, I'm like, what way was that to live? And I felt so sorry for him, and he had this dependency on me where you're the one person that can talk me out of crisis, and you're the one person that, I can depend on, and the one person that cares about me. And I felt this real sense of responsibility for him. And I don't know how to explain that, because I wasn't related to him, but it was a real, I'm responsible for you, and if anything happens to you, it's my fault. And I don't know how I ever got to that point, because as I said, I was an intelligent girl my whole life, emotionally intelligent and book smart, and I don't know how somebody got me in that position. And I always say I think my self-esteem was on the floor. So now people say, oh, you love yourself, and I'm like, I absolutely do, and I'll never meet anybody that'll ever be able to manipulate me again, because you have to sort of value their opinion first. And I know I'm like, if you think that of me, I do not care. But it took a long time to get to that point. I didn't realise it was being manipulated. I didn't realise. And the problem was when I started hiding that I was still speaking to him from my family. Me and my mum are really close. We're like best friends. The woman cannot get rid of me. If I have a day off work, like, I'm lying on her sofa getting fed, and I started not bothering with her, not seeing her. Nobody could really hear from me. And if I was on the phone to my mum and he phoned me and my call was engaged, he was like, you're on the phone to a man, show me now. And I'd have to screenshot calls. And this was a ridiculous amount of times a day. Or if he was on the phone and he could hear a buzz from my phone. So it came to the point he'd ring and I'd put my phone on silent just to prevent the conflict, not because I was doing anything wrong, not because I was guilty, but just to prevent it. So then he'd be on the phone to me and he'd text and he'd say, why did I not hear the buzz? You've put your phone on silent. So tuned in and so emotionally intelligent he was. This went on. There was times I was falling asleep on the phone just to console him, that I wasn't, like, you'd fall asleep at 11 o'clock at night. I don't know if he thought I was going to pull my glad rags on and go out partying, or what he thought I was going to be doing. But I'd be lying falling asleep on the phone and he'd say to me, "You're pretending." I used to fall asleep on video call. And there's a lot of this even that I don't tell my mum. There's a lot of it I'll never talk about because of how extreme it is, and it's nearly embarrassment. You think people are going to look at you and say, "Why were you falling asleep on video call to a boy every night? Like, you're bound to have known. Did you not just leave? Why could you not have just..." And he never lived with me. Was never in my house. We never sat and had dinners. It was always, I'd went to see him on my terms for my safety, and I used to always say, "Can you not just behave yourself? Like, just catch yourself on, stop living the life the way you're living." And I can't describe him any other way other than wild. He just, a wild lifestyle, always in trouble, police, other people, just always bringing conflict. And if I left him or just said, like, "I can't even be friends with you anymore," I'd have had the threats of suicide. And I used to always say, "This is going to be my fault," or I'd have had blackmail, or I'd have had him telling people this about you. He used to write statuses about me that were just loads of nonsense. And I used to really care. And I think it's built a real toughness in me. I used to write stuff, and I used to, do you know your ego where you do think, "I care what people think, and people are going to think I'm this bad girl and I've done all this on him and he's the victim." And see now, if you said to me, "I'm going to post on Facebook and say you just robbed a bank and killed a man in the process," I'd be like, "Go on ahead." And that isn't really a way to live either. But once you let go of that ego and what people think, you cannot be harmed by what people think. You can't be harmed by people's opinions. And I think it's just another safety measure for me. It's just a way I keep myself safe by not caring at all.
Denise, some of us, I'm going to ask you back, and I don't want to be prying, but you're saying there, people will be listening to this and you're embarrassed to say, don't be embarrassed about anything. Yeah, you're going to be, a lot of things you're saying, there's going to be so many people when that's happening to me.
Yeah.
That happened to me.
Yeah.
Or I'm going through this.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't, this isn't a one-off. This is, you're the only person ever, and oh, how did this happen to me? There's so many people. You made a term there, and I want to ask you at the very start, love bomb. That's like where it's compliments and, just...
Absolutely shower you with affection, but
Were you just out of your relationship then?
Mm-hmm. 2 months out of it.
Low?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Self-esteem was on the floor, and that is when it happens. And I have learned now, it's not anything you're doing wrong. It's they seek out people who have a kind nature, who have a caring nature, a bit of weakness. And you imagine, for example, there's 2 women in a bar and a man goes up and he's like, "Oh, I'll buy you a drink and you're beautiful," and showers her with compliments, and say she's like, "Absolutely not, I buy my own drinks, thank you." And that's maybe a woman with boundaries who's like, "I'll not be easily sort of convinced." And then sitting beside her could be a woman whose self-esteem's maybe a bit low. And it's taken me a long time to learn this. Self-esteem's maybe a bit low, and she's like, "Oh, I've never had somebody call me that," or "I've just got out of a relationship and my partner didn't call me that," or "Here's somebody who does really like me. What if this person's really like connected to me?" And start telling you earlier on, and you're like, "Yeah, okay." And it's boundaries from day one, and they realise a weakness in people from the first minute meeting them.
They're predatory in nature.
Absolutely.
But even as you said, mirroring your same belief, as in kids, family, settling down, if somebody's on the same page as you, you obviously have a tighter bond there. You feel you have a tighter bond. So if somebody's reassuring you on everything, what you want, well, then you're going to feel closer to that person.
He did say that to me at the start. It was, we have this special bond, we have this connection. And somebody tells you that, you believe them. Psychologically, that is one of the first ways to get somebody to fall in love with you. It's a psychological fact, is by telling them, "I love you and you love me." And the person's brain starts to believe it. And it isn't love, it's tactics. It is tactics and it's manipulation to get what they want. We have this special connection, and it probably wasn't even. It was just their mirroring your behaviour. And you think it's magical.
It's a very, very... And we're talking about this as you look back. Obviously, at the time, you were not aware that your self-esteem was low. You obviously know how you were feeling. You weren't aware that they were doing this. But also, something that, from what I understand of this, and now it's hard. It's hard for me and Sean here, because I would like to think we are 10 monsters. It's hard sitting here, but from what we know is the behaviour is collecting information at the start. Find out what it is. You wanted kids. You wanted this comfort. finds out that information first and then relays it as that's what he wants.
They absolutely study you and mirror it, and that's the only way I can describe it.
So, and like this, the when you were talking about the holiday, Jesus, I would say you were nervous about going on that holiday with the dynamics, let alone
I
before
was
this.
dreading it, and it's just because it had been booked like a long time previous, and I was like, we'll go and everybody will enjoy it. And I took myself up. There was a couple of houses, but I took myself to the top floor of the house that I was in, and left. Like my ex was downstairs, and my like mum was in a room downstairs and stuff. And I took myself to the furthest. Although I still do that anyway. I'm a wee bit of I like my own space, but I reassured him, and I spent a lot of that holiday in an upstairs house. There was like a balcony in the upstairs, and I spent a lot of my holiday there, away for 10 days, and you're segregating yourself to please somebody who's not even in the same country as you.
But 2 months, like I suppose it was an intense. The start was, I take it, you've seen each other a lot.
Not really. A lot of it was blackmail early on, and I don't know why I even still stayed then, because he would have rung jobs on me. He would have phoned I changed like places of employment a couple of times, and he rung places and would have made allegations against me, and like, oh, I'm ringing your nursery now, and I was like, you can't ring a children's day nursery.
You what? He rung your place of work.
He would have
to make up stories about you.
He's done that, I think, 3 times in 3 years. He done that to make up allegations about me, and I was really terrified, because then he was like, oh, and I'm getting a solicitor, and I don't know what he was ever going to actually get a solicitor to do on me, because I didn't do anything, but it was, oh, I have my solicitors building a case against you. I remember this period of time where I was really, really afraid to like do anything or be seen anywhere or on social media in case I was portrayed in some bad way. And I don't know what he was threatening me with, but there was always something.
He obviously established some fear that you had, that this was the career you wanted to build, and that by saying these things would harm that. Mm-hmm. So he obviously established somewhere that he could scare you.
Yeah.
But I can't. What the fuck? He rang. You're working in a crash, and he rang up. Like, what sort of allegations?
I shouldn't be working with children, and basically just said that I was dangerous. Now we obviously get like regular police checks and stuff, and most of the people I worked with were friends, and it wasn't taken seriously, at any time with any workplace, because of the way, you only had to have a conversation with them, and they were, every single time they were saying to me, this is not normal, like, you're being harmed, you need to get the police involved. And every single time I didn't, and I would never phone the police on him, and would never have done anything to cause him harm, because I cared more about his safety than my own. And I don't know how it ever got to that stage, but everybody around me could see it. They were saying that's normal. And my friend used to say, like, why are you on FaceTime to him every single night, proving where you are? Like, that's not normal. And I was like, but I'm okay with it if it keeps him reassured. Like, you will bend every part of your personality to suit somebody if you think.
Did you pull away from friends and family?
Massively.
So you didn't have to continue to justify what he was doing?
Yeah.
And that separation is a key in lots of manipulation and abusive relationships. Because you draw strength, you're close to your mum, sister, your brother. People draw strength from people as close to them, so they do everything in their power to separate you, to weaken you, so that the control can be easier to maintain. Yeah. But I don't want, just because we're shocked, Denise, I don't want you to shy away from telling us the details, because what you're saying to me is shocking, but it's not shocking to people that's there. This level is not unheard of. It's common in abusive relationships. People never talk about it, and they never disclose, even if they come out of an abusive relationship and they get away. Like, as you said, you didn't fully disclose the level of control, manipulation, and abuse to your ones, because you're not 100% sure why, being intelligent, and you allowed that to happen, and also you don't want to hurt them either, But I think, and I don't mean this in a weird way, I think you being so brave to talk about this here and say this, so many people are going to be resonating right now, and they might be having to show their phone tonight.
Yeah.
They might be having a screenshot. They might be having to explain where they were.
Yeah.
How long they were away, what they were doing, who they were talking to, what it was. And they might start, from listening to you, say, shit, I'm already here. I'm already at this point. But it continued on then. It didn't, that wasn't it continued on then. It obviously got worse, and you were getting these threats more and more.
Yeah, so it became where my relationship with my ex, who I'm now friends with, we'd been together years. We were friends long before we were together, and we should have been able to have, you know, an amicable relationship. There's kids involved and stuff too. So it drove a massive wedge between me and him, and he would have done things and contacted him and said, oh, she's here and doing this, and my ex would have contacted me and being like, are you serious? You're there? And I'd be like, no, I'm in my mum's. You know, like, and I would actually have been in my mum's, and then I'm having to prove to him, and I'm like, I'm now proving to two people. And then it got to the point I'd have been at work, and there would have been lies told, oh, she's here. He would have done it. I'm telling your mum you're with me. And then I would have had to prove then to my mum as well. Now, not because she asked to. My mum is very of the nature still to this day, you do not have to prove anything to me or anybody. She's really against that. And if I say, no, I'm in work, and see if I even send out of habit, sometimes I do it. I'd be like, no, I'm on my way home from wherever, and I'll send like a screenshot or a saving of a map or a live location or something, and she is constantly reminding me, like, you don't have to do that, and especially not to me. So I would have then been competing with anybody questioned me, and I was automatic proving it. There's one thing I couldn't stand at the time, and that was being called a liar. And if you had said to me, oh, you're wearing black socks today, I'd have had the trainers off and showed you, no, I'm wearing white, like, because I just couldn't. Just saying it wasn't enough, I had it instilled in me that you're lying constantly, and I absolutely hate it being accused of being dishonest, because it's not who I am. But everything was questioned, and even when it wasn't questioned, in your own head you were trying to prove it.
See, just during all that as well though, was there at any point you were like, I need to get all contact stopped?
A lot of times.
Or and did you try to stop all
I tried
contact?
so many times, and there were times I was like, listen, I will not interact with you again, and I always told him first. And if I would have said, like, I'm blocking you, and I would have said, we're in the conflict cycle here, I can't keep going round and round in circles, victim, persecutor, rescuer, over and over and over again. I said, I can't keep doing this. And I would always have told him. I would never have just cut contact and said nothing. And it would have lasted like 2 days maximum, sometimes a week. And then straight back, where there'd have been a suicide attempt, or there'd have been something, you know, arrested, or he'd have phoned you from Macabre, I've been put in remand, I was fighting somebody in the street and it's your fault. And I'd be like, oh my God, that's my fault because I started an argument with you. And in your head you do think, and when somebody mistreats you for a period of time, you do begin to believe that it is your fault. If they tell you this is your fault, like, I done this because you made me do that, you absolutely take the blame, and you think maybe it is. And that whole love bombing comes when somebody plays with your emotions. They don't just play with your feelings, they play with the chemical imbalance, you know, in you. So you have the stress hormones, cortisol, and then you have dopamine up here, and they're going up and down constantly, and you're getting the highs and the lows. And they'll keep you in this constant state of stress where you are so chemically imbalanced between endorphins, dopamine and cortisol, and you will just be longing to go back up to the high again, back up to the happiness. And they'll give you a wee bit every now and again, and you constantly think, but I know who that person was. He's the loveliest boy in the world and he adored me, and he's just having a hard time. And because I know he can be that, this isn't the real him. But it's the opposite. That is the real him, and he was acting that. And that's the hardest thing to get. I think if somebody had sat me down and said, I've gone through this too, I would have said, oh, but he's different, I can change him because I know the real him. And you hold on out of hope that you can change them. And for me, a lot of it was fear. If he dies, it's my fault. And I thought that's how it would have ended.
Yeah. See, you're just saying about McGarry. I'm just trying to paint a picture. Was he in McGarry, or was he making up lies?
Oh no,
about
he
being
would have
there?
been.
So
he would have been in just silly things like
Yeah.
3 months here and a couple of months there, and in and out for stupid things, fighting the street. Just
Because I was just thinking there,
Ridiculous.
he sounds like a kind of guy who would lie about something like that just to drag you back in again.
No, he would have
So
phoned
he
me
was actually
then
in
and
and
he'd
all.
been in. It would have been, I need clothes and I need money. And that's another thing. He became really financially dependent on me. So I worked, he didn't. And if he said to me, I'm hungry, I would have been on Just Eat and send him food to the house and thought nothing of it. And this could have maybe been 6 days a week. Or I need this bought, and he had got himself a flat and I helped him furnish the flat and stuff. And I think now, like, what were you playing at? Like, you know, going to work
Do you
to
think
financially support somebody.
Do you think looking back now, just on it, why did you feel like you always had that care and need towards him? Like, is there something that sticks out and you're like, that is why I done that? Because of you actually going out and helping the likes of the ones around Belfast, was it something like that at that time? You have that care and need in you, and you just seen him as somebody who needed you, and without you, he was never going to survive.
Yeah, naturally I am a healer. Like, I have healing qualities. I'm always the one. You could be in a house party and I'll be the one in the corner and somebody's telling me their life story and I'm going through it, and you know, I just attract. But people have problems and I just always talk through. But there's ways of inspiring people. They don't need to become dependent on you. And he was very, very, very dependent on me at that time. And it was that sense of responsibility. I can't be responsible of taking life. And he was constantly reminding me, if I die, if anything happens to me, if this happens to me, it's your fault. And I think that absolutely terrified me, because I did care about him, genuinely cared about him. But I didn't want anything bad to happen to him. And even if he, you know, it got hurt in any way, by self, by others, I had this, it's empathy. I would have had a feeling go through my body as if somebody had harmed me quicker than if somebody had harmed me. Like, I would have preferred it to have been me, because I'd have been like, oh, I can handle it, but he can't. Which is a really, really sad way to live. I was absolutely sacrificing myself all day, every day for him. But
Denise, are you one of these people that see the good in every person and think that everyone, because you mind, there's traits you're saying there, and it reminds me very much, like I would have an argument with my wife. She's a counsellor as well, and she sees the good in everyone, and she was involved in projects with rehabilitating prisoners and all, and she would see the good in everyone and think, you know, everyone, and if, as you're saying, like, feeling their pain, but there's a self-sacrificing part of you when you do that, because there's not good in everyone, and I don't mean that there is good in everyone, but not everyone can be helped.
yeah.
So when you see that person, was it you thought there was good in him that you could help bring out, but it never did?
Yeah, so there is a quality in me that I think it's easier for me to understand why somebody has acted the way they have and what place they're coming from, than it is for me to understand how is this person able to hurt me. It's easier to say I understand why they hurt me, and I can look deeper into that. And I suppose that's the therapeutic side of people who have caregiving careers. You can understand the place of where they're coming from, but evil isn't, you're not born evil. And I always maintain this, like, even mental health issues and stuff, nobody's born evil. Evil is not intrinsic. It's something that's created. It's fashioned in you through life experiences or whatever. But what happened to me after that was a choice. That wasn't mental health. It wasn't drugs. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't anybody else's fault. That was an active choice to hurt me that time.
Well, tell me, Denise, see, going through all that there, and obviously you couldn't get out of that cycle with him. Was he ever, like, obviously taking the phone and wanting to see you and FaceTime and everything else? That's all emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Was he ever violent with you though?
So when I eventually did block him for the final time, something had happened, crisis in his life, and the first person he came to was me, because I talked him out of, you know, whatever, and reassured him and everything's going to be fine, and done the whole comfort blanket and fixed everything physically, emotionally, financially for him, and just was the fixer. So one day something happened, and I remember meeting up with him where he was, and I remember feeling so sorry for him, and for the first time ever, I was not scared, and I didn't have a backup plan, and I didn't have this need to be safe. And I said, well, I'll come with you to the flat. And nobody knows this because I don't actually talk about this. I haven't even told my mum this, but I went with him to clean the flat, and the place was upside down, blood everywhere, glass everywhere, horrific. And I said, I'll do this. And at some point, we were going in, and he ushered me into the bedroom. And when he went into the bedroom, the demeanour changed, and he closed the door. And he was like, you're not fucking getting out now. And the face just changed, softened from this wee boy who was crying and soft and vulnerable. And you just want to hug them and you just want to care for them. And the face hardened as soon as the door closed. And I looked on the back of the door, and the handle had been removed off the door, so you couldn't open the door from the inside. And when I ran to the window had been locked. This was a preconceived trap to get me into a flat. So I had fallen hook, line and sinker, and I remember thinking, oh my God, how are we going to get out of here? And I shouted and I screamed, and he punched me so hard in the nose for the first time, really, really hard in the face. And I remember it wasn't pain, it was pins and needles, it was like nerve pain, it was tingling down my face. And I looked at him and he was like, now you're going to watch me kill myself. And he started to put coat hangers, wire coat hangers, and he was doing them in the wardrobe, and he was absolutely adamant that I was going to say, you've watched me suffer, he was like, I'm going to see you suffer. And he wanted, I don't know if he was going to take his life, or I don't know if he wanted to scare me. And I remember hugging him and begging and pleading, using humour, using every tactic I ever had in crisis for people who I wasn't emotionally attached to. And I used every tactic I had ever learned on every training course. And he crumpled on the floor and started crying. And whatever I had said had worked, and he softened and was like, I love you so much, and all this. And I was like, right, we'll come out and we'll get a drink of water. I was like, I feel like I'm going to faint. And we went out to get a drink of water, and I had a cardigan on, and I remember just taking off. I was assessing, am I going to get to that front door quick enough? There was a hallway. I remember thinking, am I going to get to that front door quick enough before he grabs me? And I had like a long cardigan, and I took off, and he grabbed it off me, and I had on like a wee like crop top, I wouldn't probably wear in public. And I remember having to bolt down them stairs, but it was like a second floor flat, and there was also a lift, and he got in the lift, and I ran down the stairs, but I jumped over banisters of the stairs to get away, because this is the first time he'd ever hit me. And I was like, oh, we've gone from dangerous to dangerous, like life-threatening dangerous, and being trapped is something I could not handle. Like, I genuinely thought one of us were dying that day, and I screamed and shouted, and for him to hit me as a result of screaming, I was like, we can't scream now because you're going to end up dead. And it's whatever I could do to stay alive. So I ran down the stairs, don't know how I got out the door in time, don't even know how I got down the stairs. I'll never forget the bruises over my body the next day. And I sprinted through the town to get back to where my car was, and was like, what the hell just happened? I remember the lift beeping, but the downstairs door for the communal area for the flats, it was electronic as well. So you pushed a button and had to wait for the door coming open. And I heard the lift beeping, and I was like, he's beating me down here in the lift before I get out this door. But I bolted, and I was like, never again. And that was that. And I said to my mum, like, I'm coming to stay with you for a couple of weeks. Like, I can't, be near him or whatever. And that was that. I changed phone numbers, and I absolutely meant that. And then a while later, long enough time later, randomly one day I had been out with friends, and we'd had a lovely wee day and walked kids around, the gardens, Castle Gardens in Antrim. And I remember driving home, and I got home about 7 o'clock. And about 7:30, I was on Snapchat to my wee stepbrother, having a conversation. Everything was fine, and I had just sliced a pizza downstairs, had made a frozen pizza. And by 7:45, I heard a knock at the door, at my front door banging, and I have a wee Jack Russell going absolutely buck mad, and my heart dropped upstairs, and I was like, I know who that is. Now, he had found my house initially by walking around the village until he found my car. That's how resourceful this boy was, and that's the level of safety. I was living a double life, and I was like, you can't, ever be near my house. So initially, that's how he had found my house. So I looked, and I had called my friend in Messenger. Now, the doors were locked, and I called my friend. I don't even know why I had the doors locked, because I never locked doors. And I rang my friend, and she saved me so many times in situations with him where I'd phoned her and said my location. She'd have been there in the car, like, no problem. And she absolutely could not stand him, and said to me one day, like, he will kill you if you continue to have anything with him. Like, that's not love. He's not doing that out of love. Like, you are a source of money, of support. Like, you are doing everything for him, and he needs you. It's not out of loving you. So I knew that was the one person I could depend on. She knew every part of the situation. And I rung her, and I said, ring my ex and ring my mum and ring the police. He's at my door. And she was like, I'm on my way. And she must have done the whole phone call to everybody. He shouted through the door to me, will you come and talk to me? I have a taxi waiting outside. And he was like gesturing across the street, but I don't know to this day if there was a taxi. A few months previous, I had actually rang every taxi company in that town that he had moved into to tell them, because it was near enough to me, and I had rang them to tell them if somebody from that address or that street asks to come to this village, don't let them, because I would be at risk. So I don't know if there was a taxi, I don't know if he clicked on, but that level of even trying to keep yourself safe isn't normal. Nobody should ever have to do that. So he was at the door anyway, and I got downstairs and I said, listen, I'll unblock you if you go away. Like, you're not supposed to be in my house, you're making me feel unsafe. I promise I'll unblock you and I'll have a phone conversation with you if you leave. And I could have been easily hooked straight back into the thing again out of fear, like, I'll never escape this. And my reluctance as well to phone the police on him, but this was the first time I ever agreed to let anybody phone the police or ever ask somebody to phone the police. So I had it in the back of my head, there's half a sense of safety here. And he said to me, I want to see your phone. You must be going out with somebody new. You have a new relationship, because that's what it always comes down to. You're going with somebody new, and started calling me names. And he's like, show me your phone. Show me who you've been messaging, or I'm not leaving. And I got this sense of like, who do you think you're talking to? And this sense, I'd been away from him for so long, and realised, like, will you catch yourself on? And said a few choice words and was like, take yourself off my doorstep to fuck, basically. I was like, away you go, I'm not doing this. I am never ever going to be involved in this again. This wasn't somebody to feel sorry for. He was just being horrible. And he was like, is that right? And he lifted something at my front door, which I now know to be, do you know, a stone, like a big boulder, and it's got the house number painted on it. He had lifted that and he'd run round the back of my house and straight through the patio doors. Smashed straight through, came flying up the hall. It was like something out of the Terminator, the way he came through the door. And I was fumbling for the car keys that were on the side table in the hall. So I tried to get the keys in my hand. He ripped them out of my hand and instantly grabbed me by the hair and trailed me down the hall. But the hall was covered in glass. It was tile floor from the front door to the back door. So the place was just slippy glass all over the show. The place was an absolute mess. The dog was going hysterical. It was just chaos. And he lifted the knife from the kitchen that I'd sliced the pizza with and instantly struck me in the back of the head here. So he's immediate, like no hesitation, no thoughts, no nothing. Started calling the usual, you're a whore, you're a scumbag, you've done this in me, you've done this, you've messed up my life. I hadn't done anything other than remove myself from his life to keep myself safe, and I tried to keep reiterating that to him. So I had have an email, and I was saying to him at this point, didn't even scream, didn't even feel the pain, just the first thought in my head was, you silly wee girl, you stupid wee girl. And I thought, like, when people talk about your life flashing before your eyes and your death experience, it does. And I thought about everybody in my family, I thought about my neighbours, I thought about the amount of people it would have affected. I had myself wrote off dead and buried. I was like, this is the day I die. And I should have kept myself safer, and blamed, like, myself in an instant. There was probably about 20 seconds gone by, and I had like 30 years of thoughts fly through my head. And I thought about every child I worked with, every young person, my own kids, my own family, my own everybody. And I thought how much this was going to affect everybody, the whole wider community. And typical me was thinking of everybody else. But I said to him, listen, I'm losing blood here. It was a massive, massive stab wound to the back of my head. And I said, I reached over as calm as anything to the cooker and grabbed the tea towel that was hung in the cooker. And I started holding it to the back of my head. And I said to him, listen, nobody knows this has happened. Like, I could have slipped and fell. And I was losing, like, the tea towel had filled up and I had to get a second one and the blood rate was extreme. And I said to him, if you leave now, the police won't know, the hospital won't know, like, nobody needs to know that this happened. And he was like, you think I'm fucking stupid? And was swearing. And he was like, where's my phone? And he had dropped his phone on the back doorstep on the way in. And he started looking for that. But at one point he had sat the knife down. And I threw the knife into the washing basket and he lifted another. So he struck me in the front of the head on my hairline here. There's a scar about an inch, but it was more a hit. It wasn't a stab, it was a hit. And it split me again. And I was like, this isn't going to stop. And he kept just grabbing me by the hair and he was trailing me different parts of the house. But when you went out of that kitchen, there was a downstairs toilet and it's no windows. It's just a door, you know, a simple toilet sink, wee small room. And he tried to trail me in there, and I do not know to this day where I got the strength from. This boy's like, I'd say 16 stone. I was 8.5 stone at the time. Like, he's nearly double my weight, probably double my weight. Tall, strong, heavy, angry, full of adrenaline, and he could not trail me into that downstairs bathroom. I do not know how. I was like, if I go in there, like, I'm never coming out. And at this point, I already thought, I'm going to die anyway. So he trailed me up into the living room, head absolutely pouring with blood, and he started to stab himself in the arms with a barbecue skewer. So, you know, a metal fork, 2 prongs. He would sort of, like a big thing. He started to puncture his own arms with that. Just pure crisis, but had control of the whole situation the whole time. So I then started crying, panicking, screaming, he's hurting himself. And I, in my head, for the first time, I thought, I didn't think per you. For the first time, I had this feeling where the first time in my life I hated somebody. The first time in my life I had that anger and I had that real disgust for somebody, and it wasn't out of, I can understand why you're doing what you're doing. I just kept thinking, this is control. You have control of this whole situation. And when he hurt himself, stabbing himself in the arms, I thought, you're building a case because you're going to counterclaim me. If the police ever come in, you've killed me out of self-defence. I've stabbed you with a, you know, and I thought this is the route he's going to go down. And I'm very, very surprised it didn't. But he trailed me up into the living room then, and he started saying that he would never harm me, he loved me and he would never hurt me, and grabbed me by the face, and he never wanted things to be the way they were. And then he said, but you've went back to, and he was talking about my ex, and he had a real hatred for him. No reason to, but had a real hatred for him. And he punched me so hard in the face after saying that he would never hurt me. Punched me so hard in the face that I remember stuff flying out of my nose and hitting the wall. And to this day, like, I spat onto my hand and I thought it was the grizzle of my nose, and he'd broken 3 teeth just with punching me so hard in the face, and he hit me multiple blows to the head. And I remember seeing, I don't know if you've ever played Call of Duty, and there's like a flashbang grenade, and you hear a bang and you see a flash and the ears ring and there's nothing else. He was hitting me blows to the head and that's all it was. And I was like, I am going to die. And it was constant. And then I realised it was like teeth were coming out, and that's how hard he was hitting me, and parts of my nose had collapsed. And he sat me down. I heard a voice outside and I heard Denise, and it was my friend that I had phoned. It was her boyfriend, and I like recognised the voice, and I was like, somebody's here, thank God for this. Like, even if I die, he's getting caught, you know, that he's not getting off with it. Like, somebody is here, like the call wasn't ignored. And he sat me down behind the living room door, and he was drifting in a calm and chaos, but at this point he became more calm, and he was like, you sit behind that door, and whenever they come in, if you think that you can move quicker than I can to get out that door, this is going in your neck. And it was the barbecue skewer. He was still holding the 2-pronged fork. So the dog was barking and barking and barking and barking, and she hadn't left my side the whole time, and she was sliced in bits. I don't know if it was glass or if she had been injured. Still to this day, I don't know. She's just covered, and the blood was everywhere. And because she was barking so loud, it was stressing him out, and we would call that a setting condition, something that makes a situation, and it could be a room being too warm, it could be noise. It just makes people reach crisis way quicker. And she was barking, and it was obviously really stressing them, which is part of the reason I still hadn't screamed. I still hadn't shouted for help. I didn't raise my voice. I think because I knew that the last time I done this, he had punched me so hard for it. So I was like, I'm not doing anything. I'm not playing into his hands. I'm not putting a foot wrong. I was negotiating with him, and again cracking jokes with him, and he stabbed me in the leg with a barbecue skewer because the dog was barking, and said, will you shut that fucking dog up? So then he told me to sit behind the living room door. He used my phone to phone 999 and said, I have a hostage situation here. And they asked who he was, and he hung the phone up like he wouldn't tell them who it was or the address or the details, and they phoned back. I was really confident in the fact that my phone's registered. Police know my address, you know, they're bound to, like, with work and stuff, and the phone's registered to me. The police will definitely know that that's coming from me. So even if my friend hadn't phoned the police, like, they'll know now. So it was just constant reassurance. And they rang back, and whenever they said, what hostage do you have? I think he actually gave the address, but when they asked who the hostage was, he looked me dead in the eye and said, Bin Laden, and nearly laughed. And I was like, is this a joke to you? I was like, what are you trying to achieve? And he said something about a negotiator coming. And I was like, we aren't in a film. This isn't the movies. This isn't a bit of fun. This isn't a bit of crack, a bit of a laugh. Like, what are you actually, why are you even thinking that this is in any way amusing or humorous or whatever was going on? And I got frustrated at this point, and I said, like, what is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? And I say that with everybody in life. Like, people do things, and I'm like, what is that going to achieve? Like, what is the goal here? How can we work towards the goal? And I said, what is the goal? And he didn't have a goal. He wanted a negotiator. He was like, tell them to send a negotiator. And I was like, to negotiate what? Just really, really farcical behaviour. And I know people on substances. Like, I know if you had a pint of beer and you had a conversation with me, I'd know. Like, I just naturally pick up. I know if somebody's under the influence of drugs, anything. And that boy was stone cold sober and not under the influence when he came to my door that night. So then he told me to sit behind the living room door because we created this hostage situation. And at this point I was going along and I was biding time, and I was thinking, nearest police station to me. And in my head I'm calculating like how safe I am. And I sat with myself behind the door. So if somebody tells you to block a door, your body position naturally tells you to sit with your knees up to your chest. And this was me cooperating, not keeping myself safe, but you sit, that's your strongest position to be. And he said, do you think I'm fucking stupid? Put your feet out flat. Now, the living room was carpeted, so if somebody had pushed the door from the other side that I was sitting against, I'd have just slid across the floor. None of this made sense. So because I'd sat with my knees up, he thought I was making an idiot out of him in some sort of way. I do not know. And he pushed my legs down flat and stabbed me in the other knee for sitting the wrong way. And I was like, this isn't even funny. This is like beyond serious. My head was pouring with blood. The pain started coming. I didn't know the damage had been done to my face, body, anything. And I was getting really, really dizzy. And I kept saying to him, like, I'm faint. And I felt like, you are going to lose consciousness here. I do not know how I wasn't exhausted. Do you know when you feel drained and depleted? That's the point I'd got. And from start to finish, I think I was in that house alone with him for 45 minutes. So I seen what I now know to be a policewoman was standing with a body-worn cam. I seen the light through my living room window, through the blinds. And I was like, right, it's okay. And she had witnessed part of it through the window, so I don't know if there's evidence of that. And they shouted his name. And he was like, oh, come on round the back, the door's open. As calm as anything. And I was like, how have we just gone from that to this? I was like, you're actually making a complete idiot out of me now. It's like, you don't value my life, or you don't value human beings at all. And I still thought, like, they're not even going to get in this door. He's going to stab me in the throat with this thing, like he said. And I didn't think that I would get out. So he's all about self-preservation, always has been. So whatever he can do to maintain his own self. And the police came through the door. And I remember there's like a load of male police officer voices at the other side of the door. And they called my name and they called his name. And he was like, he started crying, and it was per him, and it was back to playing the victim, and he'd gone from this violent to this soft wee boy, and I played along with it and didn't feel sorry for him. This was the first day in my life I hadn't felt sorry for him, and I played along with him. I thought, I'll be self-preservation here too. I need to stay alive, like for my family and my own kids and everything. I need to stay alive here. And I seen loads of blue lights outside. I was like, there's bound to be an ambulance. There's bound, you know, like I'm safe now. And I had said to him, listen, I know you're not well. He was playing, I'm not well, and my head's away. And I was like, listen, I know you're not well, and I'll tell them you're not well. And he was like, well, yeah. And like started smiling and stood up and helped me up and said, I know this is going to be the last time I ever see you again, and opened the door to the police and said, I know this is going to be the last time I ever see you, and I love you, and gave me a hug, and then got arrested. And then I don't really remember a lot. I remember going to the ambulance, but I remember my mum. They wouldn't let her in. They wouldn't let her like see me, wouldn't tell her anything, just told her to wait. And outside, I think it took 6 officers to restrain him. He had kicked off that much out the side. And at this point, there was my mum and stepdad. There was my friend and her boyfriend, my ex and his mum, half of the village that I lived in. There were 2 ambulances, several police cars. It was now like an episode of EastEnders. And my mum didn't know if I was alive or dead. And she just wanted to see me. And I remember hearing her saying, can I get in to see her? And they wouldn't let her in. And then whenever I did see her, all I could say was, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry. Because I felt like this was my fault. She nearly lost her daughter because of stupid choices over a stupid boy.
Look, we'll take a wee minute here. Just, have you wee tissues there?
Crying on a podcast.
No.
You have me crying, so don't worry about it. That was one of the most traumatic things I've ever listened to. And I fucking want to come over and hug you there. It's so hard for us to respond here. We're not trained in this. And it was so horrific to listen to and what you went through. And the weirdest thing to me was you told that story, and obviously then with your mum, like, I don't even know, and I'm rambling here because it's so traumatic and so hard for me to process this, but the trauma of what just happened, and like, I want to ask these details, but I don't really know whether I can stomach them. I got so angry and sad, and as you were telling that, I could just stick the knife in his throat job, and it was just it's so horrific, and what you endured was absolutely awful, and it's just a first-hand experience of the violence, abuse, and you were telling us when he came in, he stabbed you in the head, and then you endured so many, and I'm sorry if I'm asking you these because I want. The police then obviously have came 45 minutes of absolute hell. When you were obviously away to hospital, and then we'll ask you more of the situation with this man afterwards, but what had happened then? You went to hospital.
I went to hospital, and a few days later I went to hospital and I had to get my head stapled up. I had to get head stapled, x-rays for my nose. So I need reconstructive surgery on my nose. I have a deviated septum, so I can't breathe out one nostril, but I can breathe out the other. I've had to have non-surgical rhinoplasty, which is like injections to reshape your nose to try and straighten it because it was bent. They can't operate on it at the minute because I've lost my sense of smell. So the nose had been hit that hard, and your smell organ's here. The nose has been hit that hard into my smell organ that I suffered damage. And 2 years later, I still can't smell. Can't perceive danger. Can't enjoy perfumes. Can't, there's the funny side, you always think if I lose a sense, I would like it to be my smell, because you think you need your sight and your sound and stuff. But now, a fire could go off in the next room. I have no idea. Gas could leak. No idea. My clutch went in the car last week. Hadn't a clue. Couldn't smell a thing. You know, there's that sense of now. A lot of my sense of safety has been removed just with something as stupid as the sense of smell. There was the cosmetic impact of it. I was like, my whole face is out of shape, which is why the non-surgical rhinoplasty to do in the meantime. I had to get teeth fixed, filled in, you know, like 3 teeth here. I head stapled, loads of wound closures, legs stitched, and I suffered ligament damage in this knee. So it had gone through the collateral ligament, and the stabbing had gone through the ligament to hit the bone, and I couldn't walk. It then affected the muscle. Because I couldn't walk, I wasn't using the muscle, and I ended up with a really skinny leg for weeks. Like, my knee just lost everything. It was back to figuring out, like, walking again, and in my head I was like, this is okay, and played it down. From the second I left hospital, I played it down, and I kept saying to my mum, like, I'm sorry, but it's not that bad. It's not that bad. And the thing that'll stay with me forever is my mum. Like, I have a friend, and I remember we were talking one day, and like something random, World War II or something, and out of the blue he said to me, your mum has went through hell with you. Like, that woman's bound to worry about you. And I know that, like, just randomly out of the blue, and that woman has done nothing but worry about me before and since.
I'm going to stop you. You keep making it sound like you done this to your mum. And I can't sit there and listen to you saying that it was you that done this, because you didn't do this.
No,
And
I know that now.
you saying sorry for something that you didn't do is mad to me.
Yeah.
You didn't do this. This is absolutely 100% the doing of that devil.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the end to me.
Yeah.
And I know psychologically this is a lifetime trauma and stuff you work on. You're well aware. You know more than me. But just sitting there listening to you saying sorry, and that your mum, you didn't put your mum through hell. You didn't do that. And I know you may question the decisions in the lead up to all this. And that's okay for people sitting there be like, well, why did you continue? And why did you why did you meet him? It's abuse. You were abused. You were manipulated. You were coerced.
Mm-hmm.
That is what abuse is.
Yep.
You are a victim.
Yep.
And you very nearly died.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's some point, and I really hope this here, and you say that when you forget, but I really hope when you speak about that, you do realise that you were the victim. Because that, your mum loves you, obviously, but you got upset about your mum and you're saying sorry going out. That's upsetting to me, because it's almost like you think you don't know your mum.
Yeah.
There's the build up, and you're like, why didn't I then? And when we cut contact
This is
there,
it too. It's easier to maintain. It's easier to stay on FaceTime than to be frightened of him landing at the door. And I remember even after it happened, I was like, this is what happens when you cut contact with people. And a lot of work I've done since then, a lot of educative work with domestic violence victims and stuff. Like, I have absolutely armed myself with every bit of knowledge and every bit of work I could do to process how this happens. The most dangerous time for a woman is when they leave the abusive partner. It's not when they're living in the same house. It's not when they're sleeping in bed. It's when they leave and they aren't in the same place. He can come at any time. And this could never have been predicted, and it could definitely not have been prevented. Like, this was so random. It was out of the blue. There'd been no lead up to it. He was blocked. It's only whenever I got my phone back from police they'd seized his evidence. And when I got it back from police, there were like 200 blocked messages in a 24-hour period. You can go in on a Samsung and check messages that have been blocked, and it was drifting in and out of I love you and I hate you, and it was just a pattern.
well, you've obviously reverse studied this and started identifying exactly what it was
Mm.
for what it was.
Yep.
You know, you spoke of the love bombing, the you know, all the gestures you now are wearing, like, that happened to me, that happened to me, that happened to me.
Yep.
Like, I know for me then, when you were telling us that, and that was the first point of contact for the police, I know it's easy for people to judge, and they're like, why didn't you contact the police sooner? Why wasn't this boy? Why didn't you have an injunction? And I know that's simple for everybody
Yeah.
else to make that, and for people outside looking at that. But people listening to this, and I really do think, Denise, and you're so brave that to relive that trauma and tell us, unbelievable, and how strong you are to be here now, and you'll be working through this, and you know that you'll be working through.
Yep.
But if it's one person that listens to this and are on the early steps of the manipulation and the abuse process, and identifies that and says, okay, I need to break this cycle and I need to get help, and
Just leave.
there is people out there, and there's the likes of Women's Aid and places where we can link in, and liaison officers that can help. And there's new laws with the police now too, that I seen them invoke there the other day, where a young girl was abused in the hotel, and obviously she wasn't in a position to think, but they continued to prosecute anyway.
Yeah.
And that's only a new law, but there is things out there, and there's so much, as you were telling that story, there's so much me wanted to, like, you know, if they could do this or they could do that, but it's when you're being abused, and it was all rational. Everything was unrational. When you look back at it now, it was mad and it was crazy, and you're and as a rational person and a well-educated person, you can't sometimes, you'd be like, you know, as you're saying this, and why you haven't said it to people, because it was just mad and it was all happening.
And even the aftermath of it. So my life, as you would imagine, turned upside down. Every bit of my life had changed. It affected me in every type of way. And I moved down to my mum's to stay. Obviously couldn't stay in the same house. But I then was engaged with this service and that service, and GPs were referring me to psychology, and it was, you now have PTSD. And then I began to have nightmares. Nightmares that linked to other parts of my life that were not even related. So I started having flashbacks really bad, and it became apparent that I had trauma of my own that had never been dealt with, had never caused me a problem, had never been an issue. And I was now dreaming about these things, and in my dream it was him, and it was every part of my life. And the doctor was saying, you know, like, this is complex PTSD, this is now stuff that's unprocessed. And they put me on a 2.5 year waiting list for psychology, for one-to-one psychology. Meanwhile, if you're in prison, you get it immediately for free. That's the bit I struggle with.
So the perpetrator can see whoever they want straight away. The victim has to wait 2.5 years. Fuck me. Right. That's a whole different podcast, because that is broken. But
It's making me angry. Listen to that. Like, it makes me so cross.
The system is so flawed. It's so, even the support in place after, and I will say the police have been absolutely amazing. Were amazing at the time. I had crime prevention. I had so many people who provided me with all this safety gear, all this, you know, red alerts on me if a phone call came from, you know, all this safety stuff. Even though he was away, they were all about maintaining my safety. But the other side of that was, I wasn't processing this. Like, my mental health at the time, I was like, this is fine, this isn't as bad. Like, stuff like this happens to people every day, and was really playing it down. And my mum was like, this does not happen to people every day. Like, can you take a minute and just sort of think? So it happened in the September, and you're so busy dealing with different agencies and different people and sorting stuff out, and you've constant, like, I had police, solicitors, social workers, schools, everybody, so many people, so many professionals, everybody to be in contact with to figure out what we were going to do, how we were going to stay safe, everything. Meanwhile, he had the police for an interview and a solicitor. Didn't have the mess to unravel, didn't have any sort of anything to worry about, deal with. while I took a massive, massive blow financially. Had to change houses, had to change cars, had to drive. My mum lives, I don't know, 30 odd miles away from me. It was then an issue keeping my own life in my own town, and kids going to school and stuff while living there, and it was like daily commutes to do silly things. And the blow I took financially, I think I was just trying to manage everything at the time. Got Christmas over, got to January, and I didn't want to be here anymore. I just thought, like, I can't. Life would have been easier for everybody around me, and it was that thinking of the people around me, and I thought, this has all been caused and I'm still here, and it would be easier if this was gone out of everybody's life. And I, for the first time, got feelings of, I don't really want to be here. I don't want to be part of this mess. And I sat and I processed, and one day I just thought, like, what the fuck has happened? And that was like 3-4 months later. And I never really like told everybody and done the whole brave face and this front and two. I don't know, I'm really stubborn, really, really stubborn, and really, really defiant, and I always have been. But I don't know whether it's this defiance in me. I didn't want anybody to know I was suffering, or didn't want. There's times I'd be having a conversation with people and I'd be zoning out, and I'd get really, really. I'm still quite funny in a social situation, and people think, oh, she's a confident girl, and they've no idea what goes on behind closed doors. That's one thing I will say. It's the loudest, happiest people are suffering the most, and I only know that because I have been that person. So I didn't process it, and then I started to process it, and one day I was like lying in bed, not getting up, and not dealing with people, not speaking to people, and all these feelings of worthlessness. And one day I just thought, you know what, you beat it or it beats you. And I thought, I'm either going to grow from this or I'm going to sit down and take it. Either sit with it or you sit down for it. And I thought, if somebody's tried to take my life, what better revenge than to live it? I thought, why would I let him continue to rob me of my life? And I had this massive burst of energy, and I could have run miles, and that's how I deal with stress. Like, I'm really active, and I joined a gym, and I started boxing and doing Muay Thai, and releasing that energy and being active. And I thought, I can either sit and cry for 3 hours in the house, or I can go to the gym with my PT, who, like, I owe that boy so much in my life. He was the best crack, and like a real deep thinker, and the chats we had, and we talked about this and talked about everything, and the mental and the physical gains I got from that. And I had initially started because my leg was like really sore, and I thought, I need to strengthen this leg and I need to learn to sort of work that again. And I ended up just channeling all the hurt, all the pain, everything in a positive way. And I started like writing. I'd be quite creative and like writing poetry and stuff, and drawing and painting and doing all that again. And I think if I can overcome what happened to me and come out of that and say, I'm going to take something positive from this was not a positive experience, but I'm going to turn it into something positive, and I'm going to learn from it, and I'm going to become a better person, and I'm going to improve every aspect of my life. If I can overcome that, anybody can overcome anything.
I'm so glad to hear you saying that. You know, that somebody trying to take your life and you're going to harness it, you're going to live your life.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear you saying that there. Like and that's what you're doing now.
Yeah.
You're taking all that crap and you're like, I'm not going to let that, define you as such.
Yeah.
You're just going to keep on ploughing on and living your life to the full.
Like, no doubt about it, my life has been turned absolutely upside down, and the person who I was, like, I've had to grieve. As hard as it is, I've had to grieve for him. That was somebody I loved and I cared for, and I couldn't explain to my family or friends at the time, like, not that I missed the person, but I had experienced loss from him, and that grieving for somebody that's still alive is a really, really difficult thing. That's harder than grieving for anybody I'd ever lost who had died. It's far more difficult. I was also grieving the loss of myself. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my personality traits. I went through a stage of thinking, I don't want to care about my appearance because this is what got him in the first place. He saw me attracted to me, and I thought, I'm not going to look the same. I don't want to, be the same looking girl because I'll just attract another him. I went through a stage of not wanting to be kind, and I thought my personality has kept me in that situation. Like, I can't But it's not me to be anything other than kind, and I will forever devote my life to my life purpose, which is healing others and helping others, and I just don't have it in me to not do that. But I know now boundaries, and givers need to set boundaries because takers never will. And my friend said that to me, and that just resonates every time. Like, somebody that's going to take from you, they'll never set a limit, so you need to set a limit. And you can be a healer and you can be a kind and caring person, but it doesn't need to be with somebody who's going to take from you.
You come in today so timid and talking, and you wrote me, you're one of the strongest, bravest people. The grit you have is unbelievable. I definitely, fair play to you, Denise. It's hit me. I'm not even sure what I'm talking about. It's hit me because it's the trauma of it. But you know what's hit me more is how strong of a person you must be. That I'm not saying that you're on our side of it. I think there's so much of that that's still ongoing for you, and there's so much to work through.
Yep.
But to have that mindset now of I'm going to live my life and I am going to continue, because one thing I would say would, and I'm glad it didn't, for such a caring person to not close that part of them off, because I think that would be the first thing that would be easy to do,
Yep.
is to stop being vulnerable and trying to hurt or help people, because that's how you get hurt. I think it's amazing. I think Denise, for how long ago? Sorry, and that's one thing. How long ago was this? How long has this been
Just
going on?
under 2 years.
2 years.
That incident.
And it's not till you get this trial that you can really put this behind you.
Mm-hmm.
I hope the judge lets you tell him in the impact that the way you've explained it to us, because there's no fucking judge alive that wouldn't put that bastard away for as long as they can and protect other people. That's a bullet to the head. That's not changing. That's evil personified. That's never changing or never helping.
I agree.
And I hope it's shown. I hope they get to hear from, or they will get to hear from you. And the fact that you had the strength to stand up to that and not roll over and plead, because look, none of us would have judged you for taking the plea deal and putting an end to this and moving on with your life. None of us would, because I'm sure this is hanging over your head.
I'll have the rest of my life to live now where people talk about him finishing the job, and my mum's convinced the day and hour he gets out, he's finding you. And if he could find me once before, like, he can find me again. But in the meantime, I'm just going to continue on, live my life. I'll probably disappear. I'll do a disappearing act. There is a contingency plan for the day and hour he ever does get released. Like, I will disappear. But in the meantime, what is the point? I could take time off work in the sick. I could go and sit in the house and cry every day. But what quality of life will I have? And if I we talk about, I could have not been kind anymore. I could have became very hardened. And people talk about, oh, I've had a hard life. This is why I'm like this. I've had a hard life too. Didn't make me cruel. You could use drugs. You could use mental health. Never have I been around somebody under the influence of substances and they've lifted a knife. That's no excuse, or mental health. That doesn't make you, loads of people with mental health conditions, it doesn't make you want to stab somebody in the head. It doesn't make you want to take a life. That was a choice. He was in full control of that.
100%. It just doesn't seem right to me in this world that you have to make contingency plans and that you have to even think about this hanging. Your mum is a prisoner to this guy. You're a prisoner to this guy. The thought that a victim should still be worried while they're still in prison, but be worried about what's coming down, to me just highlights such a broken system. This was in America, we wouldn't see this guy for over 20 years.
You're left to there's a court date and then there's a court date, and you're just kind of left to your own devices. You're left to sort your own contact with your GP. There's nobody ever turns around and thinks, I wonder, is this person okay? And in fairness, when I went to see the GP and they referred me on, I sat and I was like, I'm absolutely fine. Like, I'm going back to work. And I was trying to convince the lady psychologist that I was absolutely fine. And I was like, listen, worst happens to people. And she was not buying it at all. She said, when you came in that door, you sat and you turned so your side was to the door and you wouldn't sit with your back to the door. And she helped me like very, very instantly. She said, you're hyper vigilant. You're watching everything that's going on in here. You're, you know,
How could
it's
you
your
not?
own safety. And I have now become an absolute expert in my own safety and other people's safety. And there's things, and something will happen. My friends will say, how did you even see that? How do you even predict that? And human behaviour is something like I can predict human behaviour now. I know how people work. I don't know. I think I've come through so much pain. And when you come through so much pain, all you want is peace. And I think now I'm just at a real state. I hate conflict. I hate anything to do with stuff like that. And you talk about being strong. I still question whether I'm strong or whether I'm numb to it. I don't know whether it's out of craving peace. I don't know if I'm strong or numb. But I think now it's just so much pain. Now I know true happiness. Now I know who I am, what I like in life, what I don't like in life. And so many blessings have come, lessons and blessings. But I think no matter how bad a situation, you can learn from it or you can grow from it no matter what happens. If someone passes away, you die, do they want you to sit and feel sorry for yourself for the rest of your life? Something happens, you nearly die. Should you sit and feel sorry for yourself for the rest of your life? And life would be a whole lot different for me and everybody around me if I had gone down. Talk about the victim mindset, and I'm not saying don't have sympathy. I'm just saying do not dwell on what happens to you. You can overcome it. You can overcome. If I can overcome that, anybody can overcome anything, and that is the message. Like, you can get over anything, through anything with the right mindset, and just do so much work on yourself. I've learned so much about myself, and if you want to sit down and figure out what makes you tick, what makes you happy, where you go wrong, where you go right, and you get to just sit by yourself, cut out all the stuff. Ego means nothing. Possessions, material possessions mean nothing. You don't leave life with any of that stuff. It's all borrowed. What you leave is your service to others, your kindness, your compassion, the person you were by your soul and spirit.
You're a better person than me. And I'll just tell you that for nothing. I would be filled with vengeance and rage and it would probably all consume me. But I really hope, Denise, and I have fair play to you, I really hope, and I think you will, I think there's going to be some people listening to this, and I think you might save some of them from having to go down what you had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that bastard rots in hell forever.
I hope you get some justice out of this whole thing.
That year alone, 2021, and in that year, in 12 months, there were 7 deaths by stabbing, 7 failed stabbings in Northern Ireland, 28 attempted murders, and 53, I think, or 58 threats to kill by a knife. And I just think, you think knife crime and you think of London, you think of gangs, you think all that. You don't actually think how many women have been murdered in their own homes in the last couple of years alone. You think of the news and how many women have been absolutely butchered. Like I could have been the 8th that year.
That's actually what was going through my head there. You could have been the 8th person to die.
Just
that year.
another statistic. And out of that 20-something who were the attempted murders, one of them was me.
Jesus, that's heavy. That is mad, and I just don't. There's so much anger from me from this year, and listening to it.
I get it. I'm sitting here and my jaw is so sore because I feel like I'm clenching as I was listening to your story. And I even feel myself tense because I feel anger now of listening to that story.
See, anger's another thing. Anger's not an emotion really. I don't like conflict, anything. But I learned that anger can be healthy too, because I got this sense of anger at him, and that's the only reason I went through the police statement. As soon as the police came to get a statement from me, as soon as I was well enough, anger drove me to do that, and it was very, very positive. Anger's what's kept me going through the court case. Anger's what's kept me keeping that anger has been very, very positive. And it's not anger as in I want to cause you harm. It's just you have removed my safety and I need like my goal now is not punishment. It's just keep me as safe as possible and keep the general public as safe as possible.
The one thing I would say, and we're not always fair to the police, they loathe these guys, and they do what they can,
Yeah.
and they be invested.
Yeah.
And you will have seen that, I would say. They're
Absolutely.
invested that he gets what's coming to him.
Out of all the agencies that are there to support you through court cases, I'd say the police have been the debrief and stuff that happened. Like after it, there's so much they have done for me, you know, to maintain my safety and maintain me even thinking, believing that I'm safe. They've just constantly reassured and been on the phone for court cases and been, you know, and they've looked after me more than any other agency who's maybe put in place to do their job. And I have no complaints whatsoever about how the police handled this.
Well, look, I just want to thank you, Denise, for coming up and telling that today. It cannot have been easy to relive that and tell us that. I know it was hard to hear, and it will be very hard for people to listen to. And we probably, after this, me and Sean record a pre-warning for people.
Yep.
Because it will be traumatic, and it'll be traumatic to people that have suffered abuse. They'll empathise. They'll as you said, vicariously, they will be in that and back in their trauma with that.
Yep.
So we probably will do it, but I just want to thank you for coming up. This is what podcasting to me is about.
Yeah.
Is things that aren't easy for me to sit here and listen to that might help people.
Yeah. And that is the plan, to help somebody can listen to this and see and escape something violent. Some violent relationship. It doesn't even have to be a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. It could be a friendship. It could be anything. Because when this happened, I had maintained friendship with him and nothing else for the months leading up to it, and then cut contact. And even if somebody knows they're at the stage of cutting contact, do it in a really safe way, because you have no idea how resourceful somebody can be and how they can find you.
Thanks, Denise.
Denise, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was mental.